Hi everyone, my name is Rahma. I'm the Director of Engineering for the Restaurants Group for Deliveroo. It's a online food ordering system for those of you who are not familiar with it. I've been with the company for about 18 months. That's also how long I've been in London for. And previous to this, I was in the Valley. I used to work for a fintech startup called Wealthfront, where I led the financial services area. In terms of like building out products from a college savings plan to a loan related product for investments. And before that I was at Microsoft. I did a stint at Bing, and then before that I was with Windows. I'm a computer engineer by trade. Spend most of my time in management now and a lot of product stuff as well.
Hi, it's me again, the person who bored you for the last half an hour. I'm Rija. I'm actually currently not working. My last gig was CTO of a fintech in London, heading up product, data, design, and engineering, which had a lot of fun challenges because they had been lacking a technical leader before I joined. Prior to that, I'd worked in Silicon Valley for about 8 to 9 years or so, doing engineering, product leadership positions. Joined this company called Wealthfront super early on, was there for 5 years heading up the core business area, and then working at a company called Zynga, which does the annoying Facebook games.
I like them. Thanks. So hey, I'm Daniel. I'm a CTO and co-founder of productboard. I'm now leading a team of around 50 engineers. I got to the position where I am now by being more like an engineer, not a manager, right? So it was about spending 2 years without salary, just prototyping some stuff, and hopefully something that'll end up being useful. So that's my story.
Fantastic. Battery's out. I'll get rid of the rest of my voice, and I'll try to wing it. Do you hear me all the way in the back? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'll try it without a microphone. First of all, the password for Wi-Fi, important topic. Let's get started. And it's, I think, a little bit what I talked about. Have you ever demoted someone from manager back to just an engineer? I don't like the just, to be honest. And do you have some sort of two paths of seniority, tech and management? I think this is something that I would like to ask or ping to Daniel directly, because this is something that was I couldn't imagine it happening before in my previous companies and teams I worked with. But this is something that I actually found, and it's not a demotion. That was the most interesting part about it.
Okay, so great question, because this is something I was super worried at the beginning. As Vojtech before mentioned that, when we had 8 engineers, I realized that, it's not gonna scale, and maybe sooner I'll make the decision and split one team into multiple teams and decide who should be leading each, the better. But I was super worried about making a mistake, because I wasn't really sure how to figure out who is the best candidate. And then I realized, it can be only a demotion if getting to the manager position is promotion in the first place. And so I kind of, I avoided this situation by making it like not a huge step up for people. And we work in those 6-week cycles for products. So at the beginning in productboard, we always took 6 weeks to work on different product initiatives, and then spend another 2 weeks on some engineering cleanup task, and then work again. And so we were working in those cycles, and I used those cycles to be like a test period for people, and told them, hey, we'll be doing those 3 initiatives next cycle. We need a leader for each. You can go and try it if you like. Then you can stay and keep doing it. If you don't like it, then you don't have to do it the next cycle. And it was, it wasn't a decision from now on, till end of the days you are the manager. It was for the six weeks you can try it. And so that's how I avoided this problem in the first place. And then, some people realize that they don't actually like the position, and then they went back and now they're engineers, but others realize they actually like it and their team like them, so they stayed in the position.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, I think first of all, like it's been pointed out, it's very important not to think of it as a demotion and not to think of a transition from an IC to a manager as a promotion. It's literally a lateral move. You're gonna have different responsibilities. You're gonna have effectively like more or less like a different job description that you will be assessed on. I think the other really important thing to realize here is that when an IC does transition to management, you need to actually backfill that IC. And oftentimes, like just how hard it is to actually find a good manager, it is also very hard to find a good technical engineer. And so it's very important that you're very calculated in who you're even considering for, because you never want to lose your best ICs to be converted into management. And yeah, it's a totally different skill set, and it can work for some people and it can not work for other people. And I think as you're working through individuals, it's very important for you to be able to identify the skills and see those in individuals and nudge the people who you see can actually do well in management. And obviously like letting them make their own choice around that.
So again, I'm going to be reiterating what has been said before, is that you have different roles that run in parallel, individual contributor role, and then a tech lead manager role. You can split that up as you want to. So I've definitely had to do that coming into an organization from a past company. There were lots of, because I've been lacking that high level technical leader, there were lots of cultural issues. And certain people had been put into management positions where either they did not have the skill set and or they didn't have the interest. And if you're not interested in something, even if you may have the skill set, that's going to show in your work. So the way I kind of combated it initially was that, hey, I'm just coming into this new position and trying to do like a review of the land, so to speak, or whatever. So initially the team size was small, like everybody's first going to report into me, and then I'm going to start to create these managers and hire them from outside. But one of the signals was that a couple of the more so junior, so to speak, engineers came and gave me feedback on this one particular person who had the role of a manager. And they're like, when I was like young and early in the company, I really liked when he was taking me on these one-on-ones and on these like coffee chats or whatever, but there's only so much I can talk about my feelings, and I'm getting much more value from the technical leads and the other mentors as it may be. So like, even if you are not able to do that judgment, there's like, the impact of a bad manager is just so much more because of the people that they're actually impacting. Because at the end of the day, people are going to be leaving the managers, not the job itself. So yes, have done that, but it's super tricky as well to handle it.
Okay, this works, perfect. I was testing if people were listening, so I'm super happy they were. It was a little bit cheeky, but I'll just kind of answer that one. In terms of priority, and Martin has this latest question without upvote, so maybe I'll try to use that as well. What are the 3 books you mentioned you keep coming back to and rereading every year? So I think the number one, and if you really want to just choose one, is Radical Candor. I was on a leadership training 2 years ago, and somebody was just putting it there, and I was still in my phase of not really kind of understanding the value of that. I was reading it, and I was just like doing, oh shit, sorry, oh. And I was just kind of reflecting at what I was doing and just realizing how much I was doing wrong. So that was a very influential book for me. And also for the people at productboard, it has been something that is very well known and is really, I think, a core part of our culture. The second one is First 90 Days, and I think gives you a nice perspective on joining a new team and sort of how you need to adapt and not people adapt to you. And it's very practical. And then third is more like a classic, but I just kind of find it, I was dismissing it again at first, but I find it interesting, and it's the very, very, very classical book called A High Output Management. Also probably everybody in Silicon Valley read it, from Andy Grove, the original founder of Intel. So these 3 are the books that I sort of really liked. Do you actually have any recommendations on your reading list that you would like to add to that?
I'm really bad. I don't really. So I'm gonna pass it on to other people.
I actually like to read a lot more psychology books, and then try to relate that to human behavior, and that ties very well to management. And I think the 2 books that I really enjoyed is The Power of Habit, and then the other one's Man's Search for Meaning, which is basically about a Holocaust survivor. And I think so many of the values and like the lessons that you learn in those books, you can apply them day to day, especially as you're working with people. Because I think as a manager, like your biggest strength needs to be people skills and understanding and like empathizing and really like knowing where people are coming from and how you can work with them.
So for me, it's definitely a Radical Candor as well. It's one of the books that we like a lot in productboard, and we are buying it for new joiners. We think that everybody should read it. So for me, that's number one as well. If you want to go a bit deeper on the topic of feedback and especially empathy, I heard empathy here a few times today. It's one of our like a core company values as well. I actually realized that it's not necessarily something people are born with. It's something you can learn and practice, and you can learn it on examples of stories. And one book I really like is Thanks for Feedback, because it goes very deep into analyzing different situations and how people might feel in those situations. So then next time, if you'll be in a similar situation, you have at least something to think about. So that would be number two. Number three is Start with Why from Simon Sinek, because I realized that as you grow into being leader and manager, it's more about helping others understand why, not how and what. And so this is something that helped me keep reminded of that.
Just want to add one thing to that. Another really great book is Leaders Eat Last. And if you actually can't read the entire book, there's a very good 40-minute YouTube video where he talks about and goes through it. And that is like a shortcut if you don't have the time to read the entire book, that I would highly recommend.
Nice. I didn't know that one, so I'll be doing that on my commute. Also, if there's a question which you feel really applies to you, just raise your hand, and I'm really happy to kind of take you first. I'll take it again from the top. How do you accelerate the learning for beginning or starting managers and leaders that are new to the job? How do you help them avoid the pitfalls that you've mentioned?
I like the begging managers one.
I was just trying to make a joke.
If you guys share.
So I'm just in a recent transition of transitioning an IC into a manager. And in terms of how do you accelerate the learning, I think it's about actually exposing them to a lot of different situations, right? It's not about let's sit down and I'm going to tell you 5 cheat rules of management, and once you learn this, then you'll be golden. I think it's about the more exposure you can give them in terms of the people that they manage, the situations that they're put into. I think that would really accelerate their learning. I think even for myself particularly, I think the learning I had as a manager at Wealthfront was very different to the one I have at Deliveroo. Deliveroo is a very fast-paced, chaotic environment, and the things that you just have to deal with are just constantly overwhelming. And it's in that sort of environment where you can expose yourself to as much. Whereas in other environments, if it's very safe, calculated, and if it's a bit more slower pace in terms of the changes and what's coming in, I think then that just probably speaks to your rate of growth. And I think a very common pitfall is to be very protective of new managers, and I've done that, which is I want to make sure that everyone's set up for success, but to the degree that you can actually expose them to situations and even allow them to fail a little so they're able to learn from their mistakes.
Perfect. That was actually my answer. I think that it's very hard to just tell somebody that they are not that good as they think. Maybe the only thing you can really say is that for them to realize that what got them there isn't going to get them to the next level. But exactly like you said, I think it's about giving them room to fail and to learn from them, because nothing will replace that.
So I've had some time to think about it. The one that I've found, both that I kind of went through, as well as saw other people around me, and that I then kind of had to mentor beginning, not begging, managers, leaders, and senior ICs, is I think actually ultimately it comes down to time management. My belief is, regardless of role, function, industry, we're all just spending a whole lot of time in meetings than we actually want to be spending doing whatever our day-to-day job actually is. And when you start to have more and more responsibility, which in some sense you kind of like want, and everybody wants to be part of meetings, even if you're going to be complaining about them because you want access to that information, is just when it comes down to that particular time management. So I usually in the past have kind of like mentor people into trying to structure your days, like just have like one day or one afternoon that's solely based for your one-on-ones. Just have these blocks on the calendar of when you will be actually doing interviews as opposed to having your calendar being the wild, wild west and like, the recruiting coordinator can schedule whatever there is on there. We're having these meetings for the cross-functional stuff as it may be. And then the second part, maybe some of that I've worked with have been nicer than some of the others, has been how to say no. I think a lot of times, and that's how you kind of grow in your career because you start to do more than whatever it is in your job spec and everything, and everybody recognizes you. And it can be really easy to try to go that above and beyond, but then the practice that you set is gonna end up creating that culture for that whole org, and those other folks are gonna start to expect that from the whole org just because you're going above and beyond. So I think it's really important to be really good with your time and learn when to say no.
Great answer. I think there was something Rahma said that I wanted to just follow up on, so I'll use my sort of power here to ask a question actually, which is down on the list. And I can totally relate to the business sort of driven and also kind of high-paced an operations business. It's very different from a SaaS business where, for example, in Deliveroo, and it's just personal experience, you have people on the ground and you can't ignore them. And it's just like in a SaaS business, it's like somebody sitting in an office, but I got tens of thousands of people on a scooter in the city, and it doesn't work. It's really something that's just bad, and it's really bad, and you feel bad about it. And also it's a pretty competitive landscape. How do you deal, the question here was, it was asking about a little bit different, but how do you basically kind of, I lost it, like in a very like sort of business driven and like a very high paced environment, how do you keep up with all of these approaches, and how do you kind of, don't get dragged in to that sense of urgency and forget about like all the things we're talking about here, all as fancy as they sound?
Yeah. I think the first thing is actually resilience. You will go through a lot. You will go through a lot of ups and downs and stuff. And to be able to have like some eyes at the end of the tunnel is extremely important. I think like coming in with a longer term strategy and going back to Rija's point of like actually saying no, because at Deliveroo at any given point of time, there's like literally 100 things I can do. And it's for me to be able to prioritize and say no to like everything else. I think it also ties back to the whole time management aspect of it. I have only limited amount of time. Like I cannot invent after 24 hours, right? And I've been in phases where I was literally on the verge of burnout. It's also about like just putting in certain boundaries in place and being very like clear with both your management and the rest of your organization about these are the 3 things that I do really care about, and this is what I'm going to be focusing on. Now, those 3 things can change, and they can change quite quickly. They can change on a weekly basis and on a monthly basis, but still be working towards those things. Oftentimes, you just have to like let the distractions be and kind of be comfortable that there will be fires around you, but this is not part of your longer term plan, and so you're going to have to let that burn. And I've seen almost like 2 really, I think both of the leaders actually really admire Deliveroo, and I've seen 2 very different approaches. I've seen a leader be in the trenches and deal with every single fire as it comes and just like knock it out of the park, but that was only very much of a short-term gain that they derived out of it and a short-term impact that they made to the company. And I've seen another leader who's just like said no to a ton of things and literally focused their entire effort on a longer-term plan. And in the start, you're kind of wondering, it's like, oh, this person's really not in the trenches. Do they even know what's going on? Like, do they even care about it? And then like after a while, you're like, oh, I get it. Like I know what they were doing, and this is actually really beneficial. So I think one of the things that we like to say at Deliveroo is all develop some level of Stockholm syndrome, because when things actually go slow, you're just like, what is wrong, what's happening? But yeah, it's really about like, having a longer term vision and keeping your eyes on that goal, and not getting overwhelmed with all the chaos around you, so.
That's awesome. You want? All good? Can I continue to the next one? I think maybe that's like a connected one. That's for upvotes. I'm not completely skipping the order here. Tracking goals and interests of your team becomes harder when the team scales, and tips how to handle that. So you're kind of letting those fires burn, but at the same time, you're kind of like this tunnel vision of looking at your long-term strategy. How do you be aware of what's your team's interest in this question, and also kind of how do you kind of just be aware of the fires which you might actually need to attend to. You can start on it also as well.
I think I got a good answer. So we use OKRs, which is something that works reasonably well in just having a structure first across a company and having a long-term goal, and then just to make sure that everything you do ties up to that overall goal and overall vision. And what I like this approach as well in my personal life. And so talking about time management, so I actually like this methodology called Hejl results, which basically says very simple thing is that every year you should think about what's the top 3 things you wanna accomplish that year. Think about imagine yourself at the end of the year. If those 3 things would be accomplished, are you going to be super excited about it? Right? So think about what are the top 3 things you need to get done that year, and then every month do the same thing for the month. So every month think about to get to this overall 3 goals for the year. What are the 3 things I need to get done that month? And then you can do the same thing for a week and then for a day, and that can make sure that you are always working on things that are helping you get to the overall goal, not things that seems super important, urgent now, but maybe don't matter in the grand scheme of things.
I think one thing that I do with because it was focused on the people, is the fact to actually make sure that all the individuals have some sort of a development plan. And the sooner you can come to an understanding between you and then that individual and how they're doing, and continually check in the progress of that's very helpful. And I think, again, in a very chaotic environment, oftentimes that can be missed. But then you're gonna have to pay the cost of it when it's review cycle comes around and people are almost surprised or shocked of no, I thought I was doing great. I can't believe I got this rating. And I've seen that in Deliveroo happen as well, right? The other thing you also have to just realize is that when you are in this sort of a structure and you likely have more people reporting to you than you can count on your fingers, you effectively then have to prioritize amongst the people, right? It's not about saying some engineers are more important than others, but some investment that you're going to make in one engineer is going to be received better than another. And again, appreciating the fact that you only have 24 hours in a day. And so there's a limited number of people that you can truly invest in, and you need to identify who those high performers are, and invest in them, and probably invest in them more than the others who are not going to be able to be as receptive to the level of effort that you're putting into them.
I mean, similar stuff. I think at the end of the day, communication is the most important thing in any relationship, personal, professional as it may be. So yes, there's the high level company goals. You have a vision, strategy, roadmap that you're executing on. You're in a startup. Everything is changing around you. There might be the whole world on fire. But at least for me, as I kind of said in my talk, it's the people that kind of make it worthwhile for me. So kind of having those strong relationships. I don't necessarily think that it's just about kind of having one-on-ones per se, because an ad hoc conversation can be a lot more useful than a structured, scheduled one-on-one that you have. So just going back to that thing of do your best to try to understand the incentives and motivations of those individuals and make sure they're continually motivated, and you can kind of see that in the end productivity, and just have a strong relationship as much as possible.
Great, thanks a lot. I was hoping that there's a tiebreaker. That was why I was asking my separate questions, but there's 7 upvotes here. But I was trying to think about it. How did you deal with awkward moments during the first one-on-ones? It's first one-on-ones with people which report to you, as in you kind of inherit them or they're freshly hired, or is it the first one-on-ones after, for example, you become a manager when previously you were a member of that old team? I'm probably guessing now that I think about it, it's the second one. Or maybe I can ask the audience. Ivan? It's not too hard.
Or maybe, can I can maybe ask on slightly different question, answer a slightly different question, because my role now is to help new managers to grow into that role and get ready for their first meeting, right? And so it's something that I was thinking about a bit, and there are two parts of that. One is actually for the first meeting, there's a actual structure that I'm advising our managers to follow, which is just about establishing the relationship and asking what the direct reports actually needs from the relationship, what they need from each one-on-one. And so there is actual set of questions they go through, and that helps to avoid making it awkward. But then second strategy second thing that I'm doing lately is actually role playing and helping them to feel and go through certain situations that they might experience in real life. So for example, one of the example is that I would act as their direct report, and I would ask very kind of personal question, or I would ask something like, hey, I have this problem that I'm spending quite a lot of time in the evening playing games or watching YouTube videos, and I go to sleep late, and then in the morning I'm super tired, and then I'm not productive in the morning. Can you help me as a manager? So that's something I personally heard so many times from my direct reports, and so it's one situation you'll get to, is that they'll ask you questions about personal problems you don't really have answer to. Maybe you don't know how to solve this, right? So just to see how they react, and then in certain cases you can see that, for example, they initially think that as a manager you should always have the answer, but that's not the case. So just to be comfortable with not having the answer, right? And maybe think, hey, that's something I experienced as well, so I cannot totally relate to how you feel, but sorry, I don't have any solution for you right now, but let's work on it together. And so knowing how to respond in those new situations is definitely helpful for them.
I think that makes
Okay. Can I answer a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I like the so if I can just hijack, and there's something I've been thinking about a lot. How do you preserve or at least influence transformation of the culture during the times of aggressive growth of the business? And that's one of ours. It's basically a very hot topic for us at productboard. The company grew from being in one room where you could stand up and broadcast information and be heard, to an office where you need to walk a minute across the whole office to basically see the people you knew, and you've basically been sitting in one room, like probably going to be 2 floors in here. And it's going to get only harder. And we also have the San Francisco office where some people might start rotating soon. And for me, I was in a little different situation, not preserving a culture, but rather how do you actually define a culture, and how do you basically ensure that new people which will join the company sort of fit in that, and maybe even understand what it is. And for me, it was about trying to understand what is that implicitly defined culture and turn it into process. And I know it's like an ugly word, and it's something that smells, hey, this is a corporation. But essentially, for example, I can tell you great engineering practices like continuous deployment, and it's something that we want to be agile. We don't want to get stuck. We don't want to have a release manager or something like that. But what you can do as a manager, and what your power is, you can put process in place. And it can be some very simple policies. If I'm going to go back to my engineer, for example, we wanted to really kind of have a sort of DevOps, almost no ops approach. There was just a simple rule I could enforce: no manual clicking in the AWS console. Worked wonders. And it can be for non-technical topics as well. The way you define feedback and performance cycles, and how do you treat them, and the way you communicate about it, and how you make it explicit. People are really good at following patterns, and when they will join an organization, they will look at how other people do it, and they will tend to follow them. And if you basically kind of do that little nudge and help basically put that and not in stone, but basically somehow make it very clear, a really good employee handbook. For example, if you can, I think they recently published it, Basecamp has a great employee handbook you can read through. And if you read through that, you suddenly start absorbing that culture from the company. And I think it's also a great sort of skill you need to learn, going back to the skills, being able to communicate and like really express your intentions and make it as easy for new people coming into into the company to discover those paths and basically follow them. And then you will basically find a team of people which might even preserve it. Maybe you should also evolve it, right? So basically which then as they learn this can push it further. So this is something that really kind of turning the implicit into explicit is something that is for me a responsibility of the manager as well.
Yeah, and I think I would really echo that. That's one of the things we've also done at Deliveroo is a lot of the culture which was very implicit, we jotted that down in terms of like our engineering principles. And then it actually almost made it like a bit more of a standard, and anyone coming in was able to come in and appreciate the things that we do genuinely value in our engineering organization, and why those things are actually important to us. And then they're also actually tied to our levels and expectations framework, so that if you are exhibiting those values, then you are then meeting those expectations of an engineer at XYZ level. And the other thing to also add to that is the fact that it is okay for culture to evolve. Just like your company is not the same company that it was a year ago or 2 years ago, your culture is also going to evolve. So just, again, jotting them down, but then like reviewing them on a more regular basis and then going like, okay, maybe something actually needs to change here. So I wouldn't always actually preserve the culture that you had as a startup of a 5-person team to now a 50-person team or a 100-person team. It should evolve, and it does need to evolve.
I'm super excited about culture, so hopefully I won't spend too much time on this. But exactly as Vojtech said, we are growing quite fast, and so for preserving culture, the techniques and strategies they used in the past are not going to work in the future. And so in the past, it was heavily relying on me being the role model for everybody in the company, and everybody else trying to imitate whatever me or Hubert, my co-founder, we were doing. But now, with 120 people over how many? 5 different countries now. It's not gonna scale, right? Like, no, I'm not able to speak with everybody every day and spend enough time with them. And so we need to use different ways how to preserve the culture or evolve it. One is, let's make sure that we have our values defined, and not only that we know them, but they're written down. They're really being used during the interview process and then during onboarding to make sure that people know not only what they, what's the name of them, but as well, what they really mean for us, and they know the stories. And then think about systems you can put in place to further enforce that, right? So one of the best way is recognition. So every time you see anybody to act according to those values, make sure they are recognized, ideally in the public, right? So that's one of the best ways to do it. Or you can use other systems. Like, for example, if you think that you want to create a culture of feedback, then let's make sure that every manager is asking for feedback during every one-on-one, or there is some performance management system put in place that everybody goes through 360 feedback every half a year. So think about different things that you can put in place that will further enforce the culture you want to create.
Cool. Rija, or pass?
I have a bit of a controversial opinion on this. So. Yes, I mean, every company has culture, and yes, you align them to the different goals and levels and everything. I do agree that the culture needs to evolve based on the people. It's actually, I think, one of the reasons why diversity and inclusion can sometimes be hard, because you're like, no, that's like the cultural values that we came up with. Well, you came up with them when you were like a 5-6-person company, and more often than not, and by more often than not, probably like more than 99% of the cases, you actually didn't really have a lot of diversity. So you're gonna stick to those values and then use those like super ambiguous and cultural interviews to now say no to people or say no to somebody's promotion, as it may be. So I think they definitely need to evolve. The controversial opinion is that I've seen instances, like I think cultural values can be good, but it's that same thing where a knife can be used to kill someone, it can also be used to chop up vegetables and feed the poor. And going back to those performance assessments and potentially hiring stuff, I've seen it be used as a weapon, and it can be very easily weaponized. I'm also in the saying that I'm not currently working, and so like, I talk to recruiters and founders and entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I sometimes kind of like roll my eyes with, and when I talk to friends and family in the professional, in the tech world or whatever, it's like, well, one recruiter literally just told me that I know every company says this, but our culture is truly unique. I mean, I think it's like everybody's just trying to go for like the same cultural values, like, be open, honest, collaborative, or whatever. Like, it's not rocket science, so to speak, right? So my controversial opinion is just more so like, I don't, like, yes, they need to evolve or whatever, but I just don't necessarily think like we need to be so stringent. Like at the end of the day, for me, like we're just trying to make the company and the people around us successful, right? So sorry, apologies. I kind of like went to get each other's.
Great answer.
No, it's. How do you? I mean, this is a really interesting one, I think, and I think we've all been there. I think it really has to do with the value of despair, imposter syndrome, and maybe if I can add a spin to it, how do you know if you're doing a good job or not? How can you tell, like for yourself as a manager? How do you figure that out? And that I kind of see that as an answer. Am I an imposter or not?
So I don't have answer for this specific question, so I need tips.
I think that would be by the health of your team, right? Like how the team is doing around you, like, what their view is, what the health of your, average, and this is being answered from a manager perspective. Like how easily, can you actually communicate to your team? How much trust do you have established with your team? How comfortable do you actually feel of like going on vacation and expecting things to run smoothly? Or do you actually need to like constantly check back in to go like, what's happening? In terms of dealing with the imposter syndrome, I think like almost probably every single person here, we've all gone through it. I think it's after a while, you just kind of actually need to embrace the fact that like, to some degree, everyone is not actually has dealt with it, everyone is probably dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. And actually like, doing a job where you don't actually know 100% of exactly what you're supposed to do, that's not a bad position to be in, that's actually a really good position to be in. Because more likely than not, if you were taking on a task that you know how to do already, you probably wouldn't feel challenged and you wouldn't feel excited and you wouldn't feel motivated, right? So I actually think it's quite healthy to have a bit of imposter syndrome in there somewhere, but obviously not get overwhelmed by it, and to like deal with the sense that like, okay, cool, like, I didn't know this thing today and that's totally fine, but I have faith in my own abilities, that I can overcome this challenge and eventually get there. And yeah, it did used to bother me a lot, at the start, but I think eventually I just got to the place where I'm like, oh, this is good for me. Like if I don't know how to do half my job, like this is really good, because like hopefully in some other time I'm gonna figure that out, and then I'm gonna have another imposter syndrome for some other skill that I don't know what exactly how to deal with.
So I don't actually have like a true answer, it might not be like a great answer, but I think one of the ways to kind of combat that professionally is one of the jobs of a manager is you're responsible for the people to make them successful. So I kind of put the onus on them. We all suffer from imposter syndrome, and I can kind of like drone on about, particularly if you come from like a minority or whatever, then it becomes sometimes even harder to, and there's like a whole study on women having confidence issues and whatnot. But it might not be a great thing, like you need to figure this stuff out for yourself or whatever, not necessarily have it. But the job of a manager is to make sure that those people are successful, and so part of that job is like if somebody's doing a good job, you gotta appreciate them, right? And like you gotta make them like, hey, this is like, Bob, you're actually doing a good job, or Alice, you're actually at this level, you've been like super amazing or whatever, you're a rock star for the team. And so once you start to hear those encouragements and environment, so definitely the manager, but then also like the professional colleagues and the friends and family. So like I wasn't necessarily like maybe earlier on I didn't think about this so much, but I definitely try to do that as much as possible. Like a friend of mine, she's gonna be becoming like the first female VC partner in Europe. Another one was featured as like, first 40 under 40 in like Germany or whatever. and they're all dealing with it, like, I say, congratulations, you totally deserve this or whatever. She's like, no, I just feel like this imposter syndrome and that I totally don't deserve this. This is kind of like a fluke or a PR thing that they're doing it. So, I guess my way is like surround yourself with these people in your professional and personal life, and then also if you're a manager, then please do your best to try to acknowledge the good that you see from the folks within your team, because everybody's probably suffering from it. But maybe see a therapist if you have these, I don't know.
Okay. I think just kind of following up on that, not only like appreciating them, but also sometimes just kind of showing a bit of your own vulnerability might like do a bit better than, because you never know when a compliment or sort of comes off as superficial or something like that. But really, when you actually accept you don't do something perfectly, I think that can do wonders for people under you. Hey, he doesn't know as well, so I'm off the hook. Hiring, it's probably my number. Somebody was talking about the top 3 priorities for yourself for next year. So probably for next year, on my top 3 list is actually grow product board, also including the challenge it brings. How do you help hiring in your companies? I think this is really different based on how big the company is, and sometimes you actually have to do a little bit more. I think it was Rija talking about like what you sometimes have to do what needs to be done, and I think this is a great case of it. Who wants to start? I think I would like to. I like this because it's very practical, and we've been like also very sort of theoretical, and I think it's good and it's really important. But this one, I think it's also a nice practical question.
Yeah, I actually think I got a bit of flavor of like, hiring for an area that had like no investment at all, and then hiring for Deliveroo, where, we do have a recruitment team. So like, where you do have an active recruitment team, I think as managers, you can like help out with not just like participating in the larger recruitment process, like being part of the actual loops and stuff. One of the first things I did at Deliveroo was actually design the engineering manager loop. And then just making sure like, does this loop actually work, and going through with it. I help out a bunch with sourcing, which I think is very critical, because oftentimes like recruiters actually need engineering leaders in the company to do sourcing, to do the reach outs, because it just gets way better responses than a recruiter doing like a cold reach out. Participating in events and activities, actually hosting these events is actually very important. Being a prominent member of like the larger community. Now, whether that's like, management community, whether that's like certain languages that are tied to your tech stack. So Deliveroo is very active in the Go community. We're also very active in the Rails community, so that people can actually identify Deliveroo with those specific languages. And this was all my experience in London, where we still had like a full-fledged like recruitment team. When I started hiring in New York and building out the team there, I literally started from scratch. So it was about like, how do I go on and hire a recruiter? How do I even interview a recruiter? And yeah, it was just about like, just starting from a blank slate, figuring out like, what sort of agencies could work, and just reaching out to agencies to go like, what's your rate and how does this entire process work? So yeah, I think it's about like actually figuring out like where you are in the process for which company, and just being okay with the fact that you're just gonna have to start out, on a completely like blank slate without any sort of additional help, and trying to make sense out of that.
Cool. One thing we realized at Product Board that, recruiting, especially here in Prague, Czech Republic, is a lot about building long-term relationships with people. Every engineer here is probably getting anywhere between 10 and 20 like recruiting emails every week, and if you'll send the 21st, it's probably not gonna cut it, right? So it's in my mind, it's more about building your network and meeting people, and the first goal really is to get to know them and understand what type of problems they are working on right now, because that might be super interesting for you as well. Maybe they are solving problem you solved before and you can help them, or they already solved the one that you are dealing with right now and you can learn from them. And so that's in a lot of the cases that's the goal on meetups and different random coffees people can set up from engineers from other organizations. And if you have already this relationship established and you are going out and meeting with these people from time to time, then you can quickly sense when they're starting to be unhappy in their current job, and that might be, first maybe you'll help them deal with that situation, but then if it's not getting better, that's the best way you can talk to them and ask them whether they maybe want to join your company where you actually don't have those problems, right? So that's the best pitch you can do by understanding their motivation and needs and problems they experienced in the past. And so if that's not gonna happen, then it's still fine because still you can learn a lot. But that's one way what we are doing at productboard.
Originally, we've scheduled like the end of the discussion for like 8:30. I'm wondering how to do this. I feel also like that there's questions coming in. I was thinking about doing like a last call for questions. I will go through maybe 2 more questions here, but if somebody wants to get prioritized to make it a little bit more interactive, if somebody raises their hand and asks it, they get like a first ask. So if that happens, I'm happy to ask anything, even if it's lower on the list and it's not visible here. Otherwise, I'll try to tackle the things we have on the board. So like I give 10 seconds, and otherwise I continue on the list, and we do 2 more, and then we can eat something and then talk together and discuss what we've learned today. Okay, I guess that's enough. Okay, what do you think about transparent salaries? Cons, pros, maybe also could be individual salaries, like Buffer does it, it's one of the only companies I know who does it, or maybe salary bands at least, kind of like be with the levels. What do you think about it?
So I'll start with saying, I like to pick my battles, right? By which I mean that, can you hear me now? Is it better? Okay, so, you don't have to innovate in all the areas. You should be very selective, and most of the things, if you want to build high growth company, most of the things you'll be doing, you'll be just copying others. The industry best practices, the standards, the things that most companies are doing the same way. And for me, this is one of the examples. I never heard about big benefits of having salaries transparent, and so that's why I decided maybe we'll have the salary bands transparent, but exact salaries of each individual, they can be not transparent, right? And so, one thing to think about is where do you actually wanna risk and try to make innovation, and what are the things that probably don't matter that much in the end. And then, in this specific case, since I never tried that, I don't have experience, but my thinking is that you actually want to avoid a discussion where people will be challenging, thinking why different people have maybe higher salary than them or lower, and it might not be obvious what's their actual impact from the distance. So maybe somebody is helping us as a company to build better employer brand, and that might be thing that we value a lot, and so that might be a reason why maybe they are making a bit more compared to what they should just based on their technical skill. Right, and so it might be hard for people to really understand what the overall impact is and why they have the salary they have, especially if they are lower on the career ladder. So that would be my thinking.
So just to start off with, I have yet to come across a single individual who was happy about their own salary after learning about the salary of their peers. Because they'll probably start off with finding peers who they're maybe getting more than, and they're like, oh, super happy, or maybe along the same lines. But they'll soon end up and find someone that makes them feel miserable about their own salary, or just makes them feel undervalued. And I think a lot of times people just do a simple apples to apples comparison without actually appreciating the circumstances in which a person's salary might be what it is. Salary also is not just your base salary. Salary is your equity. And it's also determined based on what competing offers you had at the point that you joined the company. At what stage did you join the company? What was your coming in salary, right? What did the company have to counter to actually just bring you in? And so there's a lot of facets that going into making the individual salary of any given person. And those all need to tie it together. And if you just go around blanket asking people what's your salary and then comparing to yours and then just going oh wow, I think I do more work than you. So clearly I would deserve a bit better and a bigger salary. So I think because there's so many individual aspects that are associated in every different salary, I think having bands and probably even talking about bands, that's not a bad idea. but like not actually disclosing like individual level salaries, because salary is also tied to your performance, and like, you know, if your performance is this by this round, then your salary is gonna go by this. And so it's just like it's a whole can of worms that you can open up. And again, I have yet to encounter any one person who was like super happy with like, oh, now I know the salary of all my employees, and like I totally see like, you know, where everyone's coming from. It's always led to like some level of like dissatisfaction overall.
Yeah, I mean, definitely all those points never get to do compare and contrast. I think the other part of it is, at least the world that I come from, compensation is tied to your role and level. So like ideally, like within engineering, you kind of like have E1 to E7, or you can imagine like further levels, because you need to promote people higher just to keep them in the company. Sorry, you guys, you wasn't hear me. So I was just saying that salary or compensation is tied to your role and level. So like within engineering, usually lots of people do like E1, which is like a new college grad engineer, to say E7 or whatever number you come up with, and then you have bands within each one of those. I mean, I don't think it's good for anybody to know what level you're particularly at, and then of course, based on level, you can determine what the compensation is, because it goes back to at least my belief, the point that I was making earlier, in my rant before, that it's more so about the value that you're bringing to the table right now. Like if you know that, Rahma is at an E5 versus Rija, who's like at an E1 or whatever, does that mean that the whatever I'm saying at that particular meeting does not mean as much because Rahma is now at a higher value? And human beings, like, you know, we're emotional beings, so we do tend to look into those things. And it just seems to be like more, at least in my opinion, it's more like a private factor. So I'm not sure you think like neither level nor compensation is good for anybody, like the whole environment, nor that individual.
Okay, maybe. I was just about to say that this one is like very practical, but I think these are a little bit maybe just kind of a personal touch. If you feel free to take, or maybe for the last round, feel free to draw from any of these questions which you can relate to. But looking at you, I feel this one or this one, it's closer to home.
Yeah, so I want to talk more about the motivation, because, you know, my mental model for what manager role is that you are essentially a multiplier for your team in terms of, you know, how much you can deliver. So let's say you are in a team of 5 engineers, you are one of them, and let's say that the overall output of the team is 5, right? And now if you are promoted into being manager for the team, and you are no longer coding, then, you know, the rest of the team can deliver only 4. And your job is to figure out, you know, you can do anything you like. Figure out what to do to make sure that the team is more productive than it was with you as an individual contributor. So make sure that every engineer is at least 25% more productive than they were before, so that you are on the same level. And so one mindset shift you need to make is stop thinking about how you can produce value to how you can help others produce more. And second mindset shift is about, this is really a long-term game. You are not thinking about next week, next 2 weeks. It's more like over the course of a whole year or 2. And so it's really, you know, this is really about having an impact. And so having bigger impact within the team and within the company. And you have basically 2 options: either technical, you can do this as an individual contributor engineer working maybe on better architecture, or working on, you know, developer experience, making sure that maybe your CI pipeline is much faster, so it's not blocking engineering time. Or you can do this through, you know, more soft skill managerial activities. Let's say you help your team define much better goals, so they're not wasting time on things that don't matter. Or, you know, you realize that you are missing a skill in the team, so maybe you don't have a senior backend engineer and that's slowing the team down, and you can help figure out how to get that skill on the team, either from different team in the company or by hiring. And so, you know, we all want to increase the impact we have within the company. It's more about where do we feel comfortable. Is it by building more tech that will make everybody more effective, or it's all the other things? And I personally really like the diversity of things, and the freedom is that You can do really anything. It's up to you. It's up to you what you do. But at the end of the day or at the end of the year, your goal is to make sure that the team is as proactive as possible.
So I'll try to tackle maybe a couple of these. My motivation to become a manager, very similar to what was said earlier, is the impact and also seeing the growth of the people. I think actually for me, when I actually started my career off, I had a mentor who was personally just vested in my success of my career, and I think that left such an important footprint on me in a way that I genuinely, when I work with someone, I need to actually care for them and I need to see them succeed, and it's actually seeing their success not just in the current company and the current group, but their lifetime success or their success over their careers. So it's I derive a lot of happiness from just seeing someone grow, that investing in people. And I think a lot of times the larger impact that I can have in a company is through being someone who can have maybe a few discussions that get the ball rolling rather than being responsible for working and implementing everything myself. The most rewarding thing on being a manager is just seeing other people's growth around you. It's just wow, I now let this person appreciate this fact in themselves, and now they're able to grow further. I think the thing is in terms of the question around why do you think so many people with poor soft skills become managers, it's probably due to a common misconception, which is manager is a promotion when it's not. And it's also about people just recognizing or just thinking the fact that I am going to grow only if I become a manager. And that I've also dealt with individuals in my own team who had that misconception, right? And it's very, very important for all of us to actually clear that misconception from those individuals and really help them realize that you can make a lot of impact and you can make a lot of change and difference just doing well in what you do and what you enjoy doing, right? So I think it's very important for every company to take on the task and the challenge to define an IC growth path, because management is not the only growth path and not everyone is actually cut for the responsibilities. So I think the fact that if a lot of companies don't do a good job at it, people only see the promotion, the way I can only get a promotion is by becoming a manager.
So I definitely agree with her on the poor soft skills becoming manager, where if people misunderstand the different roles and levels within engineering, that individual contributor is a parallel or domino path to tech leadership and management, and think of it as a promotion. The other reason, in my opinion, is even when you do have these distinctions. So even if you're a 2 to 3 person company, you're gonna have politics. As you start to grow and scale up, you're gonna have even more politics. One of the things that I found is as companies grow and scale, and people of course everybody's gonna say, no, I hate politics, I don't wanna work in a place that has politics. Well, politics is everywhere. My belief is it's more so what can you kind of safely function. But as organizations grow and scale, some people become, and either past experience or as they grow in the environment, they become really good at kind of playing that politics. And as the organization scales, the higher level perception of that individual becomes different than more so the lower level perception of that individual, aka within their team, and particularly even within their peer group. So I've definitely in my career seen people that definitely had a lot of years of experience, great brand names and everything, and everybody within their engineering team did not like them, did not find any value in them. But that person constantly, because they were really able to play that game, so to speak, or whatever, and the higher level folks are just looking to them and whatever they're hearing from them, are actually doing a great job of going down to the skip levels and the lower grounds to see how things are doing, to figure that out. I mean, there's companies with folks even at the leadership level, chief product officers, where literally I know of engineers that have left that company purely because of that product person. So that manager thing is not particular to your own function. You're gonna start to have impact on other areas as well too. So TLDR is more so for politics. And
So that was the why so many people with poor soft skills?
yeah,
Okay.
it's more so politics, and some people become better at playing that game.
Okay, cool. I think apart from don't be that person. No, I think I'll stop now. I mean, if, by the way, I'm looking at the admin view and we have like 20 more questions, so we're not going to be able to go through them today. I do take it as a bit of a, let me ask, okay, I'll do a brief question. For who, raise a hand if you found today valuable and you would like ever possibly to visit something similar again. Fantastic. I love to see that. Oh no. I'm leaving just super pumped. Thanks a lot. No, for us again, as I was saying in the beginning, I think if we actually are able to build a community around this in Prague, I think this can be super valuable, not for everybody sitting here, and also for people which are aspiring to figure out if this is a good career for them as well. So thanks everybody. The questions are great and it's beyond my expectations. So as a small reward, there's some food over there. So who was hungry and powered through everything. Before you leave, I would like to thank Rahma and Rija for flying in. I think it's been just like a fantastic element to this, and also instead of us just talking about how we do it here, just getting that A, validation, B, sort of controversy sometimes, and C, also like the other side. So that's been, I've also learned a lot today. So thank you a lot, and thanks for making the trip to Prague. I really value it.
Thank you very much.
Just last thing, yeah, thanks for everybody for the organization, Vojtech. Thanks a lot for asking all the questions and doing your great talk at the beginning. I'm so sad that we haven't managed to go through all the questions. But if there are any things that you are struggling with in your current job or you wanna learn more, I have one more offer for you. Feel free to reach out to me. My email is daniel@productboard.com. So if there's anything I can help with, happy to chat, happy to have a call, happy to go for a coffee and talk through it. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thanks a lot.
I just like that, likewise, feel free to reach out to, I'm Rahma, Javed, you can just send me a message and, yeah, we can go from there.
Yeah, likewise, happy to help, but I just like to give a shout out to these guys over there. I feel like I've networked quite a bit, particularly in the London and the larger European tech scene and everything. And it was totally like this random email message and everything too. But just given all the interactions that I've had with these guys and just learning everything throughout just this night as well too, it's rare to find such great people and such great culture. So thank you to you guys for having us, inviting us, making us feel so comfortable, but also if you guys are in Prague and looking for a great job,
Not scripted, yes.
these guys are amazing.
Thank you. So let's go drink and eat. Yeah.